I got a very interesting comment the other day, and when I was reading it, I got a huge nostalgia flashback, and the comment went something like, I miss factions like we had in Modern Warfare 2. And then I was trying to remember what factions were in the first place, because the first thing that came to mind was that we were supposed to get factions in Black Ops 4 Zombies, but never did. We ended up seeing faction type stuff within Cold War, and then I was thinking, well, how does that correlate to multiplayer? And then it hit me like a train. We had factions in Modern Warfare 2. And if you guys don't know what factions are, it was the teams you played as. So depending on what map you had, you would play as one of two factions, either the good guy faction or the bad guy faction. The factions in Modern Warfare 2 were the Task Force 141, I think the US Army Rangers, OPFOR, Spetsnaz, the militia, and the Navy SEALs, and you would either be the Rangers, Task Force, or Navy SEALs against the militia, Spetsnaz, or OPFOR, depending on where you were fighting on the map and where your map took place on the world. And it wasn't just Modern Warfare 2 that had factions. We had factions in COD 4, we had factions in Black Ops 1, we had factions in Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 2. And then ever since Ghost, we've only seemed to had like good guys versus bad guys. For example, in Cold War, it's NATO versus Warsaw. That's it. Regardless of what map you're on, it's NATO versus Warsaw. It's not US Army versus the Viet Cong like it is in the campaign. It's NATO, Warsaw. That's it. And it makes sense because we have operators now. And the comment also said, screw operators, I want factions back. And I agree and disagree at the same time. So let's look at Modern Warfare 2019 because it has both factions and operators. You have the Allegiance and the Coalition, the good guys versus the bad guys, except, however, the operators fall under different factions within the game. You have your factions in the Allegiance like the Spetsnaz, Jackals, the Chimera, and the Shadow Company, but you don't really see anything in game that represents those factions. You just have your character from that faction. In Cold War, it's a little watered down from that, and it literally just is, are you Warsaw operator or Milsim, or are you NATO operator or Milsim? And I was thinking how much character multiplayers lack nowadays because there isn't these factions in the game. Not that it makes the experience any less from what we're used to on the golden era Call of Duties, but it's something that could bring a lot of character into multiplayer. If you guys played Modern Warfare 2, think back to some of your greatest memories. You might have, oh, this map was really cool. I really liked using the ACR. I really liked using the TAR 21. But did you ever think about the announcers in the game that were from specific factions? You can go on YouTube and search up Modern Warfare 2 faction voice lines and see every single faction and its voice lines for every scenario. For example, when an AC-130 is called, every faction has a different call out for the AC-130. US Task Force 141 is enemy AC-130 inbound very casually. US Army Rangers is a little bit more, you know, AC-130 above, kind of get ready, and then you get to the Spetsnaz where it's enemy AC-130 above. Enemy AC-130 above! And you think like everyone is about to die. Like the amount of character it adds to the game when you have different factions that have different voice lines. Like they're all pretty much saying the same thing. Everyone is saying enemy AC-130 above, but each faction has a different way of delivering the line. So depending on what faction you're in, you have a different kind of vibe when you're playing those maps. Like if you're Spetsnaz and an enemy AC-130 above, you kind of feel like, oh shoot, that's actually bad because there's an AC-130 above. And then when you hear like the militia or the SEALs call it out, it's like, it's, you know, it's urgent, but it's not like the Spetsnaz, and it just adds character to the game. And the reason I think it's overlooked so much is because it spices up the game and you won't hear the same voice line over and over again. Thinking to Cold War, I hear let's do it for Uncle Sam whenever I'm playing as NATO so much when we're trying to win the game. And you know, you get those like those little announcer voice cues where it's like, we'll reset and get him in the next round, or let's do this for Uncle Sam, meaning the NATO's gonna win for the United States. It's stuff like that, and it just gets very repetitive and you don't have that character that the old games have. And it was fun and unique because depending on what map you had, you could tell like, oh hey, we're just not like the general NATO or Allegiance or Coalition or anything like that. Like, there are actual factions here, and it kind of immerses you in the map a little bit more. Not that it changes the gameplay anymore, it's the immersion where it takes away if you have the same announcers for everything. Now let's talk about a way to fix this or improve this for future games. Let's look at Modern Warfare 2019, for example. You have the two factions, the Allegiance and Coalition, and then within the Allegiance and Coalition you have like the sub factions like the Spetsnaz, and we've already talked about some of them. But here's what you could do to kind of make the immersion a little bit more interesting. You have specific announcers for a different type of map. So say you are playing on a jungle map during Cold War and you're on the Warsaw. Instead of just having the standard Warsaw announcer, you have like a map specific themed type announcer, and you would have like a Viet Cong announcer if you're on a jungle map, or if you're on Armada, you have like a Spetsnaz command officer and a NATO command officer that announce to each the NATO and Warsaw factions. And depending on what map you have these different announcers that add a unique twist to the map and make it feel like a unique experience, rather than just, oh, we're playing on this map, let's do it. And you don't have to eliminate the two factions. Like, you don't have to get rid of NATO and the Warsaw faction and break them up into their subsets. You can keep the loading screen and the team scoreboards as NATO versus Warsaw. You just change the announcers based on the location that you are within the game. And I think if you just added this small change, it would add so much character to the game. That way you have these really cool factions like we saw in Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare 3, COD 4, Black Ops 1, Black Ops 2, World at War, all those types of games. And ever since then, we have had good guy, bad guy faction. In COD Ghost, we had the Ghost team versus like the South American enemy faction. Advanced Warfare, good guys versus Atlas. Infinite Warfare, same thing, good guy faction, bad guy faction. World War II, Axis, Allies. It was pretty cookie cutter of what factions were going to be, and that doesn't take away from the gameplay at all. The gameplay in some of these games are really good, and how the game function itself doesn't rely on the factions itself. I just think about it and what factions added to the game, and it was pretty interesting. It didn't make the games overall better in every single way, shape, and form, but it was very fun. Thinking about when I played Modern Warfare 3, I loved playing on specific maps. Like if ever I got Resistance, I was super hyped if I was the GIGN because I loved the announcers that team had. I think the factions back then were such an afterthought that we took them for granted, and now that we're used to good guy, bad guy, I think it would be cool if they brought it back. And something I've done recently is I've gone on YouTube and straight up Googled like the GIGN loading music, Spetsnaz Modern Warfare 2 loading music, Spetsnaz Modern Warfare 3 loading music, and I've gone through a bunch of these old faction soundtracks and voice lines, and I was thinking how this small change could improve future Call of Duties. And as I said earlier, operators are going to be in Call of Duty till God knows when. Because operators mean operator bundles. Operator bundles means Activision can make money. However, I think there's an easy way that you could balance operators and factions. You could have faction-specific operators, and say, for example, we get Modern Warfare 2 Remastered, and they add operators into Modern Warfare 2 Remastered. Sure, people would be like, oh, this sucks because you can't actually pick what you want, and it ruins the original game, and it's not really a remaster, it's a remake at this point. But all those politics about a remaster like that aside, you could have those cool factions and have operators for the factions. Like, just have super generic operators, nothing like we see today. That would be a drastic change from what we saw in the original Modern Warfare 2, but I think you could actually strike a really good balance between the two, where Activision still makes their money from operator bundles, and we get these cool voice lines depending on what map we're playing and depending on what faction we are. And let's say, so there is a multiple different types of factions within Cold War. You have the Spetsnaz, the KGB, you have the Viet Cong, and a bunch of other operators from the kind of USSR faction or the Warsaw faction. What happens if you are a Spetsnaz KGB operator, but you're fighting in Vietnam? Well, you would have the Viet Cong announcer as your map announcer, and you would have all those voice lines and all those theme songs for the Viet Cong within Cold War. Sure, your character and operator might not fit exactly within the faction, but you're still Warsaw, and it would be the same thing for NATO. What if you are an MI6 agent, but you're fighting in like a US map or something like that. Let's just say theoretically there's a map that takes place in the US, even though I don't think there is. But even though you're an MI6 agent, you would have like a CIA announcer and like maybe a US Ranger or a US Navy announcer. And you could implement this into future games as well. Look at Modern Warfare. You could have, rather than just Captain Price and the Allegiance being like, oh, who dares wins and stuff like that. Like, not that who dares wins is a lame line, but you could have like, if you're fighting in Russia or if you're fighting in France or something cool like that, you could have like GIGN, SAS, and all of these cool announcers that we've seen in previous games that we could have in next games or future game to increase kind of the, as I said earlier multiple times, the character of the game, because I think it would add so much. It would be such a small change, but I think it would be greatly appreciated and most likely underrated or unnoticed at all. But I think if there were these unique factions that we used to see in old games and current games, I think it would spice up the game and it would make the games feel more, and I hate saying this, but more immersive. Anyway, that's my rant on some of the comments that I've read recently within my comment section talking about factions. I hope you guys did enjoy. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about factions if you used to play some of the older games. Did factions add a lot more than we ever noticed, or do you think factions are just overrated or just don't really need to be in the game? And if you do miss factions, let me know what some of your favorite factions are and what you miss about your specific factions. Anyway, leave a like if you did enjoy. Dislike if you didn't. I don't know why I had a stroke there. There's no hard feelings if you guys dislike the video. Anyway, subscribe for more videos in the future. Check some social media links in the description, including the Discord if you guys want to join the community over there. And I'm about to head out. And if there is one, I'll see ya in the next one. Peace.